Have you ever had people cheering for you one minute and criticizing you the next? Have you ever had two different crowds of people doing that or two different people doing that at the same time? That's the story that I want to look at this morning here, Monday, April the 6th of Passion Week. And the story is found in Matthew chapter 21. We were looking this past Sunday, Palm Sunday, at what's called the triumphal entry of Jesus. And we talked about the question that he created, which was, who is this? Immediately following that, to set the stage for this story, Jesus heads to the temple. And we pick up that story in Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 through 17. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. Jesus entered the temple, verse 12, and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, the scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. The blind and the lame came to him in the temple and he healed them. The leading priests and the teachers of religious law saw these wonderful miracles and heard even the children in the temple shouting, praise God for the Son of David. But the leaders were indignant. They asked Jesus, do you hear what these children are saying? Yes, Jesus replied. Haven't you ever read the scriptures? For they say, you have taught your children and infants to give you praise. Then he returned to Bethany, where he stayed overnight. Pretty incredible. Can you imagine the scene? The Pharisees and the religious leaders had already watched this crowd centering around Jesus. So much so that when Jesus came in on the donkey and the colt next to it, people were asking the question, who is this? And some of the crowds yelling back, it's Jesus of Nazareth. And the Pharisees are now yelling at one another, trying to figure out how do they get rid of this guy. And as a matter of fact, this Jesus now ramps up his journey to the cross and the resurrection. And now the religious leaders and the Romans now ramp up their desire and their opportunity and their plan to get rid of Jesus. But it is at this moment that Jesus goes into the temple. He walks into the court of Gentiles, and you can almost imagine what's going on because people, he's already created a sense of commotion. And so as he goes through those temple gates and he gets into that outer court of the Gentiles, where Gentiles were normally allowed to pray, where other people were assembling and there were different schools of prophets talking to one another and allowing the Gentiles to be able to speak and to hear and to reason and to listen. But Jesus notices something. He looks around, and there's a bunch of people selling animals for sacrifices. They're money changers, he calls them. Now, as some of the reports go and some of the research shows, they were actually selling things for if it was worth 10 cents, they were selling it for 12 cents. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it was enough because they were already charging exorbitant prices. And often the animals that they were selling, the doves and things like that, were not unblemished. And so consequently, they were just ripping off the people who needed this for religious reasons. It's kind of like, when there's a hurricane in Florida and people are selling plywood for 20 or $30 a sheet when you could normally get it for a whole lot less. There, because the people needed to do the sacrifice for their religion, because they needed to pay temple taxes, because they needed to do certain things according to the Pharisees. Now they're going to take advantage of them. And so Jesus says, enough. You're not going to take advantage of these people anymore. And I'm sure the scene was incredible because Jesus is just taking the tables and he's throwing them over. People are probably backing up going, whoa, what is this guy going to do? And is his disciples now going to come in? Is there going to be a battle? Is it going to be a mob scene? And he's turning over the tables and he begins to preach to them. And he says to them, you're not going to make my Father's house. It's a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of thieves. You're not going to do this anymore. They all probably stood there dumbstruck, like, what do we do now? Well, as always, when you take a stand, you will get a reaction. Even the children, when the people started to get healed and they started to see Jesus, just like the crowd of people that knew who he was when he was coming in to when he first entered into Jerusalem itself, and people were chanting his name. And people were cheering him on, and the religious leaders were criticizing. Now, the very children were saying, praise God for the Son of David. They were again cheering him on as the Messiah. And of course, when one group is cheering you, the other group is criticizing you. It says, but the leaders were indignant. And they're like, do you hear what these children are saying? Why don't you stop them? This isn't true. And what Jesus did is he went back to truth. And he said, haven't you read the scriptures? For they say you've taught the children and infants to give you praise. Now, notice verse 17. I love this. Then he returned to Bethany, where he stayed overnight. Pretty incredible, isn't it? He returned to Bethany. That was it. As a matter of fact, what Jesus decided to do was he decided to continue the course. Regardless of whether people were cheering him on as a Messiah or people were criticizing him for what he was doing, he continued the course. And that's a good idea for us today. With all that's going on, it's a good lesson for us on this Monday of Passion Week. To whatever God has called you to do, continue the course, because in the end, he's going to bring life to whatever it is that he has birthed in you. So today, whatever the course he's called you to, continue it. Keep on keeping on. And we're in this together. Together, we're going to keep on keeping on. Together, we're going to continue the course. God bless you. We'll see you soon.